guys, welcome to SheKnowsArsenal. My name is Jessica and I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacinho Tweets and at SheKnowsArsenal. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about center forward, striker, whatever you want to call it, and doing a little bit of a scouting report on that position for Arsenal. I was going to start off with midfield, but because of the news that came out about Darwin Nunez today, which we will go over, I do think it's more appropriate to start with center forward and then go into those other positions later on in the week and throughout this international break. So we'll start off with striker today. Tomorrow we'll do left wing, winger, attacker / second forward. We'll go through that tomorrow, and I'll pull some different players for that, and we'll talk about it. And then on Monday, we'll go over midfield, if that sounds good to you guys. There's also some other shows that I'm working on based around, just specific players, talking about how Thomas Partey has really changed over the last couple of months, as well as Bukayo Saka. So tons and tons of content coming out for you guys over the next couple of days. Let's see what you guys are saying. Tony Glaive says, smash the like. You guys make sure you do that. Happily X says, ain't nobody here but us chickens. BX Gunner says, games on games on games today. The gods are good. I have to be honest, I'm not a big international tie. Like, it's not my jam. I mean, the U.S. men play later on today, and I watch them. I'm very stressed out about that. Obviously, we play Mexico. But you guys can keep me updated on what's going on in those games, because it's not really my thing unless it's like a big tournament or whatever. Sue me. Matt G says, evening just in chat. Evening to you as well. So yeah, before we jump into center forward, Gunnar Souls is going to join us in maybe like 30 minutes or so. So he'll be here in a little bit. But I want to start off with just some Arsenal related news before we get into the center forward conversation, just in case you guys wanted to chat about that as well. So starting out, I do want to touch on the commentary that came out on ESPN in regards to Bukayo Saka and Steven Gerrard. And I have to say, that was some of the worst punditry I've ever seen. I think it was Steve Nichols and Alejandro Moreno. And it was just one of those where it was like, okay, like, I get that you guys love Gerrard, and so obviously you're going to just take his take, but shouldn't you be looking at it from all sides and from every pundit that chipped in on that particular conversation? It was always from the other direction. And so what I found to be very distasteful through that, and like, if you guys haven't watched it, essentially Steve Nichols was saying that, like, basically Bukayo Saka shouldn't put himself into those situations to get tackled. And then Alejandro Moreno chipped in with his little, and if I'm a defender, and I see you say that you don't want to engage in the physical part of the game, which is not what Bukayo Saka said at all. I'm going to go out there and basically try to break your leg because you think you're a tricky player. You think you have skill. I'm going to make sure that you don't get to use that skill. And I was like, how distasteful is that? Basically, you're saying that it should be within a defender's right to go in and do things outside of the game in order to stop a talented player because he doesn't want to get his leg broken. I just don't get it. And it was a lot of victim blaming, like, if you weren't so good, these things wouldn't be happening to you. So, you should just be thankful that people want to break your ankle. What? And so it was terrible. And like, no, I don't think ESPN is the tip top in terms of punditry when it comes to football. But I would just think that they would at least put something out there that's not total nonsense and just, I mean, some of their facts weren't even right. And so I do think that with this, Bukayo Saka should be able to play his game, and the referees should punish the players that are doing things outside of the game to to protect the players. Like, that's the only way that the players can be protected, is if the players that are doing that, the rotational fouling and just fouling players because they can't keep up, if the referee is giving them fouls and also carding them and being willing to red card them when they do it too many times, that is protecting the player. And in that game against Aston Villa, not only were Ashley Young and Tyrone Mings rotationally fouling Bukayo Saka, but on the other side, Jacob Ramsey and Matty Cash, and once he moved over, McGinn, were also rotational fouling Emile Smith Rowe. And Matty Cash fouled Emile Smith Rowe like 6 times and didn't get a single card. And that's what I'm saying. Like, the referees, they don't have to like do anything outside of what their job is, which is, if you see somebody that's fouling is outside of the game, it's illegal. That's why you get punished for it. And they have to get punished every single time that they do it. And if they do it too many times, then they need to be carded. And if they continue to do it, or they do it in a way that could potentially injure, or is like dangerous play, they need to be red carded. And so I don't really think that that's like a serious thing that like needs to have that level of commentary where it's like, oh, well, if I'm you, I'm basically going to break your leg. Where's mommy and daddy? But Bukayo Saka is nowhere near a whiner. Like, he's been getting kicked to death for like 3 seasons now, and he's never complained. And guess what? All talented players, really good players, they go and talk to the refs. That's what they do. I see tons of players doing it. I see Harry Kane do it all the time. I see Raheem Sterling do it. All good players talk to the refs. And so for them to act like Bukayo Saka doing it is some sort of like, how dare you go and talk to the ref? You're a talented player. You're lucky to be here. Just take that leg break. I just found it to be very distasteful. And so, yeah, it was just yuck. We don't expect you to do anything outside of what your job really is. And that's what Bukayo Saka was asking him to do. So yeah, it was a very weird conversation. It was very cringy and difficult to watch. I can't lie. Matt G says the commentary was an absolute joke. Let's see. O'Malley says, Jules called Stevie out. Thank God. Ram Kumar says, physicality only takes you that far in football. No wonder England has won no major honors since 1966. Boom. Roasted. John says, ESPN's Arsenal agenda is ridiculous. I stopped watching them a while ago. I don't even watch them, but it just came up on my timeline. And I was like, I just can't even believe that you guys are peddling this bullshit. Like, because Saka never said, I don't want to be tackled at all. He's just saying, protect me. And the only way you can protect him is by ensuring that players that are rotational fouling eventually get the yellow card and the red card that they deserve if they continue to do it. Let's see. Enzo says that breaking your ankle talk is so 1980s. It really is. It's so played out. And the reason why I think players now are able to play so much longer in their careers is because they are more protected than they were back in the day. And I do think that sometimes we can take it too far to the point where you can't touch anybody. But I do think that these older pundits kind of, I hate to say it, but need to be phased out, because the way that they think about, talk about the game is not really how it's happening right now. It's all based on what they remember. And so we're getting information and punditry that's not really up to date, or it's just complete nonsense. And nobody wants to hear that shit. You know what I mean? Like, we want to hear people that actually are watching the game and taking it in from what it's like in 2022, not what you were doing or watching in the 1980s. Like, that's bullshit. Matt G says, Saka isn't even asking for special treatment. He's just asking for players who kick the hell out of him to be booked. That's all. Exactly. It really wasn't that deep, but they made it deeper because it was Bukayo Saka and his Arsenal. And I don't like this, almost like there's something in the air, something underlying that's almost like, well, he's lucky to be here, so he shouldn't be complaining. And that's a bigger conversation for another day. But I'm not feeling it. I'm really not. Ram Kumar says, the refereeing in the EPL is an absolute joke. They just seem to wing it rather than following the standard procedure every game. It does feel like they're kind of winging it. Happily Egg says North Macedonia is 1-0 up against Italy. That's wild. King Panda says rules change when it's the Arsenal, always against us. That is definitely how it feels. iGamer says it's all fun and games until somebody's career-threatening injury. Exactly, and that's basically, I mean, for Ali Marino, like to say, well, if I'm a defender, because I hear that, I'm going to basically break your leg, and laugh about it, and then say, "Where's your mommy and daddy now?" I just found that to be like, can you send him away now? Like, can we never see him again? Because not only is his commentating absolute trash, but what he's saying is just not relevant or cute or, endearing. It's just idiotic, to be honest. Ruban says the commentators for the Villa game were brutal. Yeah, it's just this weird thing. Like, I don't get it. If you guys are watching Isak, let me know what he's doing right now. Apparently he's playing, right? My thing is, I picked out 3 players. Not Isak is not in this scouting report, but if you guys feel like it's worthwhile to talk about him, we can towards the end. Tony says punditry is outdated. This is the rise of fan channels. I mean, that's kind of why fan channels are around, is because nobody's really interested in hearing what they have to say. To be honest, it's not rude. It's just real. Let's see. Enzo says Isak hasn't hardly scored a goal this year. Yeah, that's not good. Matt G says, can we please talk about the black away kit I needed in my life? You guys, honestly, so I usually don't wear color unless it has something to do with Arsenal. And if they can give me a black and gold kit that just kind of goes with my regular wardrobe, I'll probably wear that every single day. It looks so, so cool. I know some people won't like it because they just feel like the color should stay the same, but I do think you have to update it a little bit. And so I am a big fan of the black and gold kit, to be honest. Ola says those 2 ESPN commentators should lose their jobs for those comments. It's public bullying and inciting violence. Yo, I mean, keep it real. Keep it real. Ruban says thoughts on the Stella McCartney training kit. I'm big into fashion, you guys. Like, I went to fashion school, and Stella McCartney is somebody that I've studied before. I do think that it's not for everybody. I can see why the greater masses are probably like, what the is that? You know what I mean? But I will be getting one and putting it together with some jeans, and it will look really cute. I just think you can't wear the training top with the sweats as well. I just think it's too much and too busy. But if you could break it up with the solid jean, I think it does look good. But it's definitely something it's for a specific audience, and it's not for everybody, and that's perfectly fine. John says Isak needs a Liverpool level team to develop best because less pressure and better leaders and role models. So yeah, we can talk about Isak a little bit towards the end as well. So also, just to touch on it really quick, just in case somebody asks about it, Ozil being removed from the Fenerbahce squad because he got into some sort of argument with the coach. We are so far beyond this at this point. And I know that we tend to want to have confirmation bias and stuff like that when it comes to okay, well, Arteta must have done the right thing. So because, the same thing or something similar is happening at Fenerbahce. I don't really care. I have to be honest, because we're so far beyond that. Whatever's happening to him at Fenerbahce, it is what it is. Like, once you leave, I'm not really that interested in what you're doing anymore. And so Ozil was a really good player for us, fell off. We had to get rid of him, pay him off to go. And it is what it is now. But I just don't think that Arsenal and Ozil should be one in the same sentence with each other anymore, because he hasn't been here for a while. And I know that in order for people to care, you have to say ex-Arsenal star, get da-da-da-da-da-da, so you can get people clicking. But it just is what it is, isn't it? Whatever's going on with him at Fenerbahce doesn't have anything to do with us. I personally thought Arteta did the right thing at the time, just like I think he did the right thing with Aubameyang. But that doesn't mean that I think either player was shit. I just think that we needed to move on from both of them for different reasons. So yeah, that's that on that. That's just my thoughts on that. And also with Chelsea's preferred bidder being the Ricketts family, it looks like they could potentially be getting an American owner. It's something that I have been following in the background, seeing what's going on with them. The Saudi media group has been not included in the short list of buyers or bidders for them. And most of the buyers that are left are American, the Ricketts family being the top of the list. There is a no to Ricketts like thing going on, or like a hashtag going around, that's been put together by the Chelsea fan base, because they don't want him, or they don't want that family, because the father, that's not involved in this bid anyway, put out some sort of racist email a while back. So it's one of those where it's kind of like, well, you want the Saudi group, and we know how anybody that has money, that's any Saudi group, where they get their money from, and it's probably not in the most moral way, but an email has you so triggered. I think for some of them, it's more about, I don't want American owners than, I just want the Saudi owners, because I feel like they're going to have a blank checkbook. Either way, it'll be interesting to see what happens to Chelsea and how they're ran from now forward without Roman, and without that blank check. And as a fan base that understands what American ownership feels like, it's going to be different for them. So yeah. Reggie says, I'm a long time Cubs fan and I don't like the Ricketts. They're not really great owners, in terms of like, they don't do anything to make sure that their franchises are successful. And so that can be looked at some, like, for Chelsea fans, that can be something that puts them off. Dublin Gooner says, Chelsea don't want a racist owner, irony, anyone. I mean, I think it's just lost on some of them that, and it's not lost on any of us, right? We know what the deal is. We want somebody with a blank check, and we don't really care what they do. But because we don't want this American owner, I think this is for some of them, really, because we don't want an American owner. We found this racist email and now we're just going with it. It is what it is. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with them. Happily Egg says, the thing about Saudi owners is they don't care about profits. They care about glory. And see, that's the thing. It's like, if you get Saudi owners as well, sometimes they are willing to do whatever it takes to be successful. And that's really what Chelsea fans probably do want. A lot of that does come with having a blank checkbook, there's always going to be money coming into the club. They're always going to spend over what they probably need to in order to get that done. But one of the bigger issues, I think, with Chelsea was not wanting to get in bed with the Saudi media group, not having full transparency about their relationship to the Saudi prince, and knowing that Newcastle also, as Saudi owners, can make it problematic for them when, they don't want to become the second Saudi team in the English Premier League, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with them, but I am following that in the background and see what happens to them, because it will affect us as well. Like, not in terms of how we run our club, but if another club has American owners and they're not really we're all kind of ran similarly, it will even out the playing field, I think, over in the long run. All right, so there's 85 of you guys watching. I also kind of did that to make sure that there was enough eyes on it. Now we can talk about strikers. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Let's go ahead and get started. Here we are. Okay, so how we're going to start this out is this is coming from Ryan Taylor Sport. Let me see where, I think he works at CBS. Let me just make sure, CBS Sports. Let me just make sure so I have the right information. Ryan Taylor Sport. No, he's a sports journalist that works for D Express Sports. So let's see, Express Sport. So essentially, he's been putting out some. Oh, Italy's out of the World Cup. Oh, wow. All right. So, um, yeah, Ryan Taylor Sport works for Express Sports, and he's been putting out tweets over the last couple of days and during the January transfer window regarding Arsenal and what they're trying to do for the summer window. So this is coming from him. So take everything with a grain of salt, but this is what he says. Ryan Taylor Sport, Mikel Arteta and Edu plan to spend on a new marquee number 9 this summer. Arteta wants a dynamic center forward capable of playing with his back to goal, but also capable of getting in behind defenses at the tip of his 4-3-3 system. So we already know that Arsenal are going to be looking for more than one attacker, maybe 2 strikers, a striker and a winger. We don't really know what it looks like just yet, but one of the strikers is going to be a player of this profile, which also aligns perfectly with us trying to get Dusan Vlahovic in the January transfer window. He definitely fits this description. So whatever striker that we bring in is probably going to have something similar. So keeping that in mind, those those are the types of strikers that I kind of pulled out to do a deeper dive on. I didn't want to bring out strikers like I didn't pull Jonathan David because I don't really think that he fits this particular he doesn't really fit that particular description. Sorry, I'm just sending Souls the link. So yeah, you guys take it with a grain of salt, but it just aligns with what Dusan Vlahovic, his thing says. So yeah, that was pretty interesting. So let's go with the first player that I want to go with is somebody that I want to name the one that got away. Okay. That's going to be Tammy Abraham. So don't turn off just yet. Don't turn off just yet. I know some people are not really wanting to bring in players that came from rival clubs, but Tammy Abraham is an interesting one because I do think that he also gave us a glimpse of what the club was looking for in a center forward, not in January, but in the summer. We were linked with Tammy Abraham last summer, but we were unable to get the deal over the line, probably because, let's just say Chelsea was probably being a little bit difficult, not really wanting to sell to a direct rival, but also we could not sell Lacazette. So without being able to sell Lacazette, there was no way that we could bring in another striker. So Tammy Abraham was somebody that we really looked at. A lot of Arsenal fans said they didn't want him after doing more extensive research. I thought that he would have been a good choice. Not only that, I do think that this was a missed opportunity because at the time, we probably could have got him for about 40 million. Now it would cost a lot more, and he has done so well in Serie A. So as we know, the club that he's at right now is Roma. He's playing for Jose Mourinho. Just a quick overview. He's 24 years old, 6'3", English. We know that, plays for the England national team, right-footed. And he has 22 goals this season in all competitions, 3 assists in 37 matches, and 9 yellow cards. So he's another one that kind of just fits in with what the project really looks like. I think I'm actually surprised at how many goals he's gotten so far in the season. I mean, we're probably two-thirds of the season gone, and he's already scored 22 goals. Now, I know that Serie A is not as competitive, or maybe not, I don't want to say as competitive, but maybe not as good of a league as the Premier League. But he was also scoring goals in the Premier League as well. And now he's just went out to Italy and has done such a good job, I think. And he's somebody that I really wish we would have been able to get over the line, because I do think that he fits what we were going for. So this is what Football London is saying. Football London was saying that AS Roma reportedly set £100 million price tag for former Arsenal target Tammy Abraham. Ian Wright says Tammy has the hunger to finish the chances that Arsenal are not finishing right now. They're making chances, but someone is not in there taking them. Tammy is at that stage now where he would be there gobbling all that up. And we know what he's saying. Basically, Lacazette is not getting into the box the way that we need him to. And if you just look back at the couple of chances that we had off of those runs from Martinelli, if you just have a striker running across the front post, you might put some of those away. And it's really not to go in on Lacazette. We know what Lacazette is. We know how he struggles to get into the box. But he should be getting into the box. And we just need somebody a little bit more aggressive that could make those things happen. And so Tammy Abraham is definitely somebody that is at that point in his career where I do think that he could go to the next level. And he would be somebody that fits that requirement that we're looking for. And in regards to what Ryan Taylor was saying, and with the description, I do think that he fits the, he can back to goal and kind of link play and do the hold up play. But I don't see him running in behind as much. I'm not sure if that's the way that they play Roma. I do remember him at Chelsea running in behind a little bit more, but he's not really running in behind as much as the other two strikers that I had pulled out. So just keep that in mind. Just keep that in mind. Let's see. Reggie Perry says, I'm less worried about that than the thought that maybe Serie A being a little bit slower suits him better. Fair enough. Yo-Yo says, has Abraham improved his aerial ability? He flattered to deceive at Chelsea. Remember, he lost his place to Giroud and Batshuayi. Come squeaky bum time. All right. So yeah, let's go ahead and look at that. I did pull some images of just kind of his statistics. So let's look at his heat map first. So this is his seasonal heat map. This is the areas in the pitch that he spends the most time in. And so we can see that the center circle is a big one, is a big one. And that's kind of where Lacazette lives, right? He kind of lives in that center circle when we're building out of the back, building with Thomas Partey and Martin Odegaard. You often see Lacazette dropping into that center circle as well. And then what you see is that the other red spots is pretty even on both sides. So he can pretty much link play on both sides. He can attack from both sides, which is good. I do think having somebody that can do things on both sides is important, so we don't have any lopsidedness in our attack. And then we see that there's a very big red spot here, which is the area in the pitch that we need him to be, which is in the damn box. Okay. So looking at some of his statistics, and this is versus forwards in the top 5 leagues. Yo-Yo, you can tell me if you think that this is good or not. But Ariel's won, it says here, to almost 2.59 per 90. So that's the 64th percentile. So he does a lot of defending as well. Like you can see, most bars here in the defensive area are green. So he does do some of, compared to other forwards, a lot of defensive work, which is good. You do want a striker that's willing to get into the box and be a part of the defensive effort on the other end. So if you go just a little bit further up, touches in the attacking penalty area, he has a lot of touches in the attacking penalty area. He has 6.13 per 90. He has about almost 7 progressive passes per 90, which seems like a lot to me, but it's probably not that much. Dribbles completed, he completes about 1 of those. I don't think we really need a striker that can really dribble, like, you know what I mean? Because you have Bukayo Saka and Martinelli and those types of guys that can go one-on-one with fullbacks. Progressive passes. These are progressive passes received. So he's not receiving as many progressive passes, but these are the progressive passes that he does. He has about 2 per game, and that's in the 74th percentile. And then his pass completion, it just is what it is. It's pretty regular. And if we move up to the part of the statistics that we really care about, let's see, his non-penalty goal XG is 0.6, which is in the 98th percentile, which is really good. Shot total is about 3 per 90, which is in the 78th percentile. His expected assists and his assists are pretty much where they are. Like I said, he has 3 on the season, which I don't know if you guys are feeling like you want somebody that can get assists as well. I think we need somebody that can link play, but get on the end of chances. I think that's more important. And so his non-penalty goals plus expected assists, non-penalty expected goals and expected assists is 0.75 in the 93rd percentile. So I think he's pretty well-rounded. I think that's pretty much what these statistics say to me, is that he can be useful in the defensive areas, but also he's rounded his game off well enough where he's scoring goals, he's getting into the penalty area. When I looked at his compilations, it was a mixture of, tap-ins and goals from cutbacks and scrappy goals. There was a bunch of different types of goals in there. But he does like to live in the center circle, which is something that Lacazette does a lot of. He's actually quite skillful for somebody who's so tall. I mean, he's pretty much a giant. And at first, like at Chelsea, he looked very gangly and a little bit clumsy. And at Roma now, he doesn't look as weird, if that makes sense. And he's getting a lot stronger as well. And I just think his profile is difficult to deal with. Somebody who's 6'3", quite tall, a little bit quicker, that has enough skill to get past you, and can hold up the ball and do all that types of stuff. He's definitely somebody that has a well-rounded game, and I do like that about him. So here are my pros and cons of Tammy Abraham. So I think he fits the profile of the project, being 24. I think he is also an Arsenal fan. And he also fits the description of the striker mostly. He brings others into play really well, which is something that Lacazette does really well. And he has experience in a bigger league. So when I say a bigger league, I mean the top 5 leagues in the world. My only con will be that he'd be extremely expensive. Roma obviously want to make a lot of money off of him. And there's also Chelsea clauses. We don't know exactly what they are, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a sell-on clause there or a buyback, which is probably why the price tag is 100 million. And for Tammy Abraham, I'm not sure I'd be willing to spend 100 million, because although I do think that he's doing really well at Roma, and he's definitely many steps above what Lacazette is, I'm not sure that he'll ever be elite. I think he's somebody that will be very good, but won't be elite, if that makes sense. So maybe Giroud at Arsenal versus Van Persie, if that makes sense. Van Persie was elite. We knew he was going to be world-class even when he was young. Giroud was very good, but also limited, and didn't really become the Giroud that played at Chelsea and for the French national team and whatever until a little bit later. So I do think that that's a huge price tag to put on somebody that will probably never be elite. But those are kind of my thoughts on it. So what are your guys' thoughts on Tammy Abraham, just to start off with? Souls is also here. I'm going to go ahead and bring him in. Hey,
how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
You came at just the perfect time, because we are going to we just are pretty much done with Tammy Abraham so far, and I'm just gonna kind of read out some of the comments on him. Tony says, look at his nutmeg stats, it's bang average. Let's see. Nashville says, I'd like someone who can link like Laka, but has the athletic ability to get to the goal at the end of play. I mean, he definitely can do that. I will say that although I think he's okay in the air, I think that's also just because he's so much taller than everybody. I don't really, like, if I said, oh, is he good in aerial duels? I would say that he's average for somebody of his height. He can head the ball out defensively and all that kind of stuff, but I do think the next 2 strikers have him beat in that particular area. Happily Egg says, you definitely need someone to score goals. I would definitely give Martinelli a try. He can play with his back to goal. He's clever in the head and with his feet. What I will say, Happily Eggs, is that although a lot of us do believe that Martinelli can play as a number 9, I am one of those people. If Arteta and the club are wanting to spend big on a marquee number 9, it's probably because they know because they've been watching him that he's not quite ready to lead the line for Arsenal. So even though he can play there, I think we're in a position to go ahead and invest in that position. Lionide says Abraham was omitted from the Chelsea squad because of his lack of physicality. Do you really think he's the man we need? I'm asking you guys. Do you guys think he's the man that we need? Do you guys like Tammy Abraham? Kelly, who's been on the podcast before, he's usually on the Not Another Arsenal podcast more recently, but he likes Tammy Abraham a lot. I do feel like he would have been the option last summer, and I do think that was opportunity that we probably could have taken at the time. Like, I do think if Tammy Abraham is in this team, we make top 4 pretty easily. Now, is Tammy Abraham the striker that's going to get us into challenging for titles? That is the question that I'm asking you guys, because at 100 million, that's kind of what he has to be doing, right? Christopher Kafar says, based on a lot of our striker targets, Abraham, Vlahovic, DCL, and Nunez, we're not necessarily after a super technical striker. Interesting. That is interesting. Why do you think, Souls, that, the type of strikers that we're looking at, Abraham, Vlahovic, DCL, Nunez, they're more complete nines than your false nines, and basically they're the opposite of what Lacazette is. Why do you think that is? Do you think that there's a plan to, if we move to a 4-3-3, we might have a more advanced 8. Maybe that takes out the need for somebody to play like a number 10. What do you think the thought is behind this profile of striker?
I think if you look at recent weeks or like the last sort of 2 months or the turn of the year, especially when we've turned into this 4-3-3 with, Partey playing a lot in the base and, Xhaka being more of a supportive defensive midfielder. He's more of an advanced 8 that can also or does also need to come back and help if needed. So when you start to look at the way we're now building up, Lacazette looks redundant. Like a lot of recently, especially, we have said that like we haven't really praised Lacazette. He's really been average or below average, and we're talking about his missed chances when in reality we've never spoken about that, especially prior to this year. So when we start to look at why Lacazette was dropping in deep and why we needed that was because of the lack of creativity, because Odegaard hadn't hit the ground running, at the start of the season. And that was primarily why I think we were looking at more of a sort of a creative striker or a false nine who can do a bit of build up and obviously add to goals as well. Whereas with now, because of Odegaard and because Xhaka's a lot further up and Partey's dictating play from deep, and I just think the football's a lot better where we no longer need that setup. Well, we don't need a false nine. We need someone who can get at the end of those crosses because we're getting into advanced positions. But when those wingers or the fullback are in those situations, they've got nothing to pick out because, well, for one of 2 reasons. Firstly, Lacazette isn't really a target man. But then also, Lacazette doesn't have the legs to get in because he's probably initiated the move. And by the time he gets to the box, the danger's kind of done. And when he is in the box, it's more to do with we're trying to build the game up or he's not in the right positions. He's not going for those 50-50s. He's not gambling like he used to do. So I think that's what we're trying to do is we're looking at the situation of how we're playing and looking at what would suit that. Because I know people aren't going to want to hear this, but I do believe the club are trying to keep Lacazette for a year or maybe a season or 2 and bring in a target man because they'll know that, okay, we've got Lacazette if we need that profile to come in. Or if say, for example, there's games like, I don't know, Wolves, for example, or those low block games or a target man maybe isn't the right way to play. We can bring a Lacazette in. We know what he's got to offer. But those games where we've really not struggled to score goals, but we need a goal in. Like, for example, Liverpool, imagine Vlahovic. Like, I know it's a pipe dream and all of this now, but if we had Vlahovic, for example, we probably would have beaten Liverpool. And that's probably why they're looking at that profile, just because we've seen what Lacazette can do, but we're still, the club is still thinking we need something more. So if we then go and get a Lacazette 2.0 or even a better version of a Lacazette, is it really going to mitigate what we're struggling to do? And I think and it's very, very difficult to get a target man that can also link up because now the problem in modern football and modern players is they're very niche and specialist at what they do. You've no longer got the they can do everything. That kind of mold of players, they're not really here anymore. And I don't think they suit the modern game either. You can't be a jack of all trades. You have to be a master of one of them. And
Yeah.
that's why I think they're leaning towards, okay, we've got Kieran Tierney, and if rumours are to be believed, we're looking at a right back. How soon we get that right back, obviously, will be dependent on kind of what they want to do.
Mhm.
But if we're looking at crosses coming in, we don't really have anyone. Like, even if I know the Martinelli shouts, but I don't know how efficient he'd be with those crosses as well. He is more of a wants to play on the
Yeah.
more than a headering. He can do it. We're not saying he's not an aerial threat at all. And I think that's what they're looking for. We don't have an aerial threat at all.
Yeah.
So they need something that can, take advantage of those crosses coming in.
Yeah, I think that for me the key is the running in behind. I think that's something that we just once you if you don't have anybody that can run in behind, you ultimately allow the center backs to have a day off. And once they figure, oh, well, Lacazette's not going to run in behind, he's very easy to corral. He's basically going to mark himself for us. So, they can easily double team on Saka and Martinelli. Easily. And if Saka was being double teamed and he could slip one of those balls in behind and you had a fast striker running in, we're in on goal. We're in on goal. There's so many times where like Lacazette will get in an advantageous area and they'll just catch up to him. And so I do think that the running in behind makes sure that the center backs don't have an easy day off, and making sure that they can play with their back to goal and hold up the ball gives us another out ball. And then our fast players on the wings can run in behind. So it gives us kind of a 360 kind of outlet, somebody that can kind of do it all. And we'll probably lose some of Lacazette's link, but I also think we over index it a little bit. I think we sometimes say that it's better than what it actually is. Do we actually need somebody where, they're doing pirouettes in the middle of the pitch, or do we need somebody just to do quick 1-2s? All the players that I've pulled for today's show can do 1-2s. They can pass it out to the wing. They can hold it up for a couple seconds and lay it off. I do think that I'm willing to give up a little bit of the flair of what Lacazette can do in that false nine position to get somebody that can run in behind and make sure that Tyrone Mings and Konsa don't have a day off, because ultimately that's what they had the other day, right?
Yeah, that's the thing, and we talk about Saka, Martinelli will be, especially with the way that he's playing, with the praises he's getting from top managers. Teams
Mhm.
are going to now also double team him. So the problem that we have is our striker isn't doing anything to create space for our wingers, and the reason is because they don't see him as a threat. It's the story of, like, I can tell you just this season, let alone last season, the reason why Saka's been struggling at the start of this season was because you would teams could afford to put three men on him because Lacazette or Aubameyang weren't going to do anything. The left wing, as good as ESR is, he was the reason he had that explosive start was because he was afforded so much space because Saka was the one dragging the defenders out because they knew if the ball went to Saka, something's going to happen. But now what we're starting to see slowly, and the reason why Saka's getting back into form is because they're having to mark Odegaard out the game, they're having to mark Partey out the game, and obviously they have to still do what they need to do to Saka. But now the issue is they've got to mark Martinelli. So now when we look at most of our games, Saka's starting to get space that he wasn't afforded before because of Martinelli, because of Odegaard. And imagine if we can add a striker. That's why City have never failed, even though they've not got a striker yet. This season they could flop it, but the reason they've never had an issue, even though they've not got an out and out goal scoring striker, the reason why Liverpool haven't had an issue not having an out and out goal scoring striker is because you're trying to mark Salah, you're trying to mark, you know, Mane or whoever else is playing in those winging positions. Obviously now Diego Jota, Luis Diaz, and then you've got, Firmino, who's also a threat if you just leave him to do what he wants to do. Then you've also got a Mark Trent and Robertson. So what that does is teams can't just double team Salah or triple team Salah and allow Trent to do what he wants because he's just as dangerous, but just not in a goal scoring way, but a ball he can play in. So once we start to get threats all around, it just opens up so many different avenues that the things that Lacazette does don't really matter anymore. You need those 1-2s. You need the player just to touch the ball, whether it's first time or take a touch and then pass. That's what we're going to start to need, because if, for example, a Vlahovic or Nunez or what as a manager, you're not going to sit there and go, yeah, just don't bother with them because they're not going to do anything. No, if Nunez gets half a chance, or Osimhen, or even Tammy Abraham, or João Felix, or even if you want to go to the Isak route, if they get half a chance, they're taking it. So they can't afford to put 3 men on Saka or 2 men on Saka, 2 on Martinelli, and evade and the centre backs just to party however they want. So what people forget is having that central threat allows so much more openings to this team just to be able to do more, and that's what it does.
Yeah, for sure. So I just want to go to some of these comments. So Yo-Yo was saying, are there any comparisons to Jose Mourinho's Drogba since working under the same manager? No. And I think you'll be hard pressed to find somebody similar to Drogba. There's some players that just come once in a lifetime, and you'll never see them again. I think the next time we see a Drogba, it'll be years from now. Just like I think the only player I don't even know, like nobody will be close to Thierry Henry. I think Mbappe gets as close as possible. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's some of these players are just they'll never be a duplicate of them. But in terms of Drogba's physicality and his ability to bully people, Tammy Abraham definitely doesn't do that. Tony says Tammy has high floor. And I think that's really where we are, right? It's like Tammy in this team this season probably would have gotten us top 4 pretty easily. But is he going to take us to the, actually top of the table? That's kind of where it's a little bit more like, I'm not sure. Stefan says, wisely, we didn't try to buy Vlahovic for, I guess, 100K. I think maybe you meant 100 million. But I think another point that kind of brought up to me is that if we were willing to spend 60 to 80 million on Vlahovic, we're definitely not spending 100 million on Tammy Abraham. So moving on. Victor Osimhen. This is somebody else that a lot of the Arsenal fan base is really excited about. Now, when I looked up his statistics and stuff like that, I thought to myself, and also the statistics said that they're very similar. Tammy Abraham and Osimhen are very similar, but the difference is that Osimhen has the aerial ability and the ability to run in behind that Tammy doesn't really have. So he's basically a souped up version of Tammy Abraham, a little bit shorter, but is definitely available for the physical duels. And in Serie A, there are a lot of really combative and physical center backs. And when I watch him play for Napoli, I think he does a really good job getting in and amongst those center backs and making them think. But not only that, like getting fouls and stuff like that. So he's pretty much an all-arounder. I really like Victor Osimhen. So let's go ahead and see what we have here for him. Current club, Napoli, we already know that. The overview, 23 years old, 6'1". He's Nigerian, born in Lagos, and he's right-footed. His statistics for the season is 15 goals, 0 assists in 25 matches. Obviously, he had the injuries and COVID and stuff, and that kept him out for a long time. But even in 25 matches, 15 goals is quite good. He has 5 yellow cards and 1 red card. If you guys care about cards, I like to look at that kind of stuff. Gazzetta, Italy, whatever, says Newcastle will make a new bid to sign Victor Osimhen in the summer, but Arsenal, Tottenham, Manchester United are also interested. Napoli president De Laurentiis would consider offers in the region of 100 million euros. Okay. Ryan Taylor Sport also was saying that Alexander Isak, Jonathan David, and Dominic Calvert-Lewin were names of interest. Arsenal are now also monitoring other targets, including Darwin Nunez, Victor Osimhen, and Armando Broja. So the list of strikers has gotten a little bit more, gotten a little bit longer. But I also think that's probably because the original people that we were linked with maybe are not impressing the way that we wanted them to. And so we're just widening the search to see what's out there. And so now we have some more names there that are interesting. We've kind of already looked at Alexander Isak. A lot of people are really interested in him. I tend to really like him. I just wonder, is he going to score enough goals? I think that's kind of where I wonder, because in La Liga, he just doesn't have that many goals. And I know that he doesn't play for a team. I know he plays for a team that's struggling creatively, but I think that's a risk when you know you're going to have to pay the release clause. Jonathan David is a player that plays in a two-striker system, and he's really similar to Lacazette. All of his statistics and everything say, I'm just a younger Lacazette. And Dominic Calvert-Lewin is Dominic Calvert-Lewin, so I don't know what else to say about that. But let's move on from there. So this is his heat map and his statistics from FBref. Just going into the heat map first. Unlike Tammy, there's a lot less red and a lot less emphasis in that center circle. So basically what that tells me is he's not going to be dropping in deep as much as Lacazette to link play. I think that also speaks to like his lack of assists and stuff like that. I don't really think he's that guy. But what he is that guy that's going to be in the box, ready to head the ball in, to tap it in, to take shots. I mean, he is an all and out goal scorer. Like, that is his job. So if you're looking for a number nine, that is what you're going to get in Victor Osimhen. So even with his statistics, he's in the defensive statistics, he's really not as complete as Tammy Abraham, if you guys care about that or not. But his progressive carries, what was that? His progressive carries are higher than Tammy Abraham's at 3.67. So he will dribble a little bit more. And his touches in the attacking penalty area are higher than Tammy Abraham's as well, with 7 per 90. Shot creating actions, he has 3 per 90. And then right here is where you guys really care about the shots. He almost has 4 shots a game. That's a lot. Non-penalty XG, 0.59, that's in the 95th percentile, and non-penalty goals, he's in the 98th percentile with 0.78. So like the differences between him and Tammy are like Tammy will drop deeper, he'll link play a little bit more, he's a little bit more well-rounded, but Victor Osimhen is like a true 9. So you're not going to get the Lacazette part, but do you care if you have Victor Osimhen at the end of those crosses? I'm not sure that you give a shit, right? So here are the pros and cons for me. I guess, Souls, you can give me some of yours as well. The pros are, like, he fits the profile of the project. All of these guys do that I pulled up. He can run in behind and hold up. So unlike Tammy, he can run in behind, and he's very, very quick. He's a true goal scorer. So he's not a 9. He's not a 9.5. He's none of that. He is going to get in the box. He's also a physical presence. So he gets in and amongst center backs and makes it difficult for them to have, any sort of joy. And he has more experience in a big league, because I would consider the Italian league a bigger league than some of the others. The con is he will be damn expensive. That is the con. He'd be very expensive, and there's going to be a lot of suitors for him. And if Napoli are interested in selling him, they're going to sell him for a lot, because obviously, like, he made a big move to Napoli for 80 million. So he'll be very, very expensive. But what are you guys' thoughts on Victor Osimhen? Is he the guy? Do you think that, unlike Tammy, who probably just has a high floor, does he also have a high ceiling? Is he somebody that you can see playing for the top 3 teams in the Premier League? Could he play for Arsenal? Do you like this profile? Let me know. Lay down the law. Osimhen will scare defenders. Something we haven't had in a while. What are your thoughts on Osimhen? Pros, cons, thoughts, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's a very I've not watched a lot of Serie A this season, but the last 2 seasons, I've pretty much watched most of it. And from what I've gathered, firstly, he does improve year on year, season on season. His statistics do go up, and especially goal scoring statistics. I think this season he's on 20 matches, 15 goals. And last season he actually had a bit of a dip, but the season before he had 25 goals or something like that. Even when you're looking at league goals, and the Serie A is a physical defensive league in terms of just defenders. So for you to be able to score a lot of goals, I'm not saying it's difficult or it's easy, but it does show a little bit about yourself in an attacking sense. And for me, he does remind he will have that sort of first 2 season Aubameyang impact where he will get a lot of goals, and that's kind of his bread and butter. He's not a build-up striker, but he does have the physicality to maybe develop that area. He is 23, so a lot of players are still in that age, learning their craft, and they can easily become a lot better. But when you're looking at sort of how, because we've got to remember that Arteta does take a lot of influences from sort of his past managers in terms of how Wenger used to play and his influences. And when you look at Pep and the way he plays, and he's got a bit of David Moyes about him. One of the things that a lot of these managers share is a fluid striking or a fluid attacking system where they do want to interchange. They do want like, for example, we're seeing it with Odegaard and Saka switching roles, in game. We're seeing, Martinelli come into the middle sometimes. And that's kind of what we're trying to do. So even if you look at the heat map, even though it's not red everywhere, you are seeing that he does drift onto the wings. He does come into the center. But most importantly, he is that threat centrally. But what this will do, especially with the likes of, Martinelli, is Martinelli will have the affordability to go into the middle if needed, whilst Osimhen covers the wing and, vice versa. Saka can come into the middle, etc. So what it does, it allows our three to be fluid and changing constantly without a drop-off in a position. So it can really help with the way we play. And that's kind of the problem is because what we've seen is Aubameyang at the start of the season, and I do think a lot of it is sort of recency bias to why we're looking at a certain profile and why the fan base, should I say, is looking at a certain profile and being like, nope, we need an upgrade on Lacazette. It can't deviate from the style that Lacazette brings. But I'm thinking differently now because I'm like, if we had a striker in these games, we would be not winning by one goal. Even Aston Villa, we would have absolutely smoked them 4-0 in the first half. We probably would have beaten Liverpool if we had an out-and-out striker. But it's a risk thing because if we lose that build-up, do we lose some of the style that we have? And I'm looking at it and I'm like, no, because Odegaard's filling in, Partey's filling in, and we've not even gone to who that midfielder could be. So for me, this profile might actually be the fit to who that new midfielder coming in. Let's just say hypothetically we'll go and get an Awar type, someone who can be a box-to-box, a number 8 who can be creative and etc. Osimhen is that perfect striker that you need for that. Even when you look at Odegaard's most prolific season, bar the Arsenal ones, is when you played with Isak. And what is Isak? A running behind striker, someone who's got the pace to go in behind, and you can pick them out. And that's why I do think a player like Osimhen would be a good one. But like you said, the con for me is the only reason it's a con. It's not even about the price tag. It's about the amount of teams interested. And if we're looking at Tottenham, we don't know what's going to happen with Harry Kane. So they may actually need to fully go in for him. Newcastle need a poster boy. They need someone, to create sort of, I wouldn't even call it a pro, but whatever they want to call it, around, to have that face. And Osimhen is that kind of player who can be a face of a project. And when you look at Man United, God knows what's happening there. So I don't really know what their situation is going to be. Whether Ronaldo leaves, whether Cavani is definitely going. Don't know what's happening with Martial, whether he'll be back or not. So they'll actually need someone. So yeah, because I see ESR as a 10 or an 8. I don't really
S
know.
loves ESR, and you're offending S. You are.
No. I just see ESR in a different role. I don't even see Martinelli as. I'm just saying it because there's no one else at the minute. But I mean, it benefit massively on ESR because even if you look at how much space you can create for him. But anyways, yes, I do think. Look, I think we're getting bogged down because of how well we played with Lacazette. But I think the profile for me isn't one that's going to move us forward unless we're willing to kind of. This is gonna hurt a lot of Arsenal fans. Unless you're willing to get rid of Saka and Martinelli to get in prolific wingers, like world-class wingers, there's no point of a Lacazette to get us to the title. But what we need is to create space for them. And the only way you can do that is by having someone who's going to be a danger and a threat centrally to allow them to have the space to play in. So that's the reason why I'm looking at. You've got to look at the whole picture because we're looking at a Xhaka rather than an upgrade. We're looking at Odegaard that's not really played well, and then we've also got in the back of our head, but Aubameyang was shit in Arteta's system. So if we get someone of that mold, will the same happen? But we're different. We're playing completely different football now.
Yeah, and there were moments of us trying to play this way where Aubameyang looked good. I just think he got to a point where he did not want to be at Arsenal anymore, and that was more the issue. Reggie Perry says, so he's a B-Tech Abba. I would say no, because he has physical presence and aerial presence that Aubameyang just didn't have. Like, when Aubameyang really wants to, of course, he can get his head on the end of a ball, but when you watch Osimhen play, he's aggressive. Like, he is aggressive. He's physical. And I don't think Aubameyang really had that. Aubameyang could run in behind, so Osimhen has some of that as well. I do think he's just a physical Aubameyang with aerial presence. I think that's more the comparison, right? John Hinkelberg asks, would Osimhen be able to build a relationship with Odegaard? If Odegaard and Osimhen build a relationship, then it's wraps for the rest of the league, because every other aspect of how the team plays fits Victor, in my opinion. What do you think about that? What would be the best type of striker for Odegaard so we can get the most out of him?
It's very difficult because his games, like I've been saying, is always evolving, and you know what? It's not so much you give Odegaard a striker that can actually play as a striker. Firstly, I just think he needs that. He needs someone to pick out, and once you give him that, and that's why I'm not worried about what it would do to Odegaard. I'm just more about get him that striker, and you'll see the numbers improve. And for me, I think that relationship will be there because he'll be able to go in behind. That's number one. And if you look at Odegaard's through balls to even Saka or even Martinelli, he's got the range. He's not got a deficiency in his passing. The only sort of downside to Odegaard at the moment is his goal scoring ability, or to pull the trigger a lot earlier than he does. He does sort of hesitate, and that's the only flaw to his game that I'm seeing this season. It's just sometimes he needs to be a bit more confident and just take the ball first time. But in terms of give him, like, the only problem is the reason why we're not seeing that level is because Lacazette doesn't run in behind. You can't find him because he's the one that's behind Odegaard. So it's impossible for Odegaard to actually do anything. But if you look at him at Real Sociedad, for example, you've seen what he could do, the creativity, because he had Isak to pick out, who ran in behind defenders, who kind of was a havoc. He is also, like Osimhen, a little bit more, well, a little bit less, but he is aggressive as well in terms of how he penetrates into the box. And for Odegaard to then find someone, have a target to find, I think it'll be fine. Like, I don't have really a reason to doubt that partnership can't work.
Yeah, and it'll also depend on who the left eight is. I think that's really important because that person is going to have to pick up. I think Odegaard will have more assists naturally with a better number 9. But if you want to get somebody's going to have to make up the 8 assists that Lacazette has, right? And I think that could potentially come from the left 8, depending on who that is. And we will be going over that next week. Next week, we'll be talking about midfield, and that's where we can get all into the midfield conversation. Olusola says, I think Osimhen's touch will make it difficult for him to thrive in a low block tight space of the Premier League. I want to get your thoughts on this, but what I will say is that I think that's why it's important that we get another type of number 9 that can play in small spaces. Yeah, Felix, so that you don't have to worry about these things. What do you think about Osimhen's touch? Isn't it kind of similar to Aubameyang a little bit, playing in a low block?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's always doubts about how, because every league is different, but one of the biggest things about the Premier League is it's predominant, or a lot of teams, especially when you get, sort of I'd say your top 4, top 6 teams, and they play sort of I'd say below your mid-table team, so your 10th to 20th, you tend to come across a lot more low blocks, which in other leagues is very rare. You'll find the odd team, it's like 1 or 2 teams in other leagues that tend to play low blocks, whereas in the Premier League, you'll find maybe 6 teams or 7 teams that do it. And that's why it is a skill set you need to have when you come into the Premier League. For me, I think it's one of those where we've got to see how he does in this, because we can always make presumptions about his touch and everything. But one of the things that we haven't seen Aubameyang do, for example, is have that aerial threat, to be physical. And Osimhen's one of those deceiving looks where it's a bit like Saka, where Saka doesn't look strong, but he's actually a lot stronger than, like, in terms of evading tackles, or even when someone tries to barge him off the ball, he doesn't always get barged off. And that's, for me, one of the things where when you look at low blocks is how good are you aerially. That's one of the biggest things, because even if you look at Man City style, Liverpool style, against low blocks, there's a lot of crosses into the box, and it's how he can handle that more than his touches. Of course, if you have a dribbler, that can open up a different avenue. But I always believe that Arsenal are going for two profiles. Whether they do both this summer is going to be a question that's going to be answered depending on the budget, what we can sell in terms of monetarily, and how much we're starting off with. The rumours are £150 million again. So we are looking at obviously a midfielder and a striker around that figure. If we're looking at rumours to be believed, that is, like, we had 75 million in the January, which is obviously coming over because we couldn't do what we needed. And then we're looking at obviously that we were hoping to get that striker and midfielder in January, and then go get that other position in the summer, but we're going for both. So that's why I'm going with the idea of, if you're looking at 40 to 50 million pound midfielders is what we're rumoured with, and then you're looking at about 70 to 80 million. So yeah, it's roughly that kind of amount. So but again, I don't really think there's a budget. I just think go get what you need kind of thing at the moment. But yeah, I just think his aerial threat and his aerial presence and just being a poacher is what will get him the best out of him. That's where you don't want him running in behind. That's when you want him to switch his style and just be that fox in the box and be a poacher, which he can be, rather than be the guy that's going to run in behind, because you're not really running in behind to anything, because you're just going to just see centre backs in front of you. So yeah, that's why I look at two styles when I'm looking in the Premier League. Is, can you be somewhat of a target man, or do you have that in you? Whether you're elite or not, that's besides the point, because you only need to do it for like a few positions. But can you run in behind is the main one for us. And that's why I do think he's got the hybrid of the two. It's just his build-up is something we've not really seen, so I can't really tell you whether he can do it or not.
Yeah, I think the build-up thing is, it kind of goes back to do we actually, if we have a more, and this, I guess, okay, when we talk about the advanced 8, I think that will answer the question on whether or not that player allows us to have a center forward that doesn't need to build up. That, I think, is key. Like, if you have an attacking 8 that can do that job, can play almost like an 8/10 or whatever, then you don't really need it as much. I think with Xhaka and Lacazette, you have Xhaka kind of helping out Lacazette and Lacazette helping out Xhaka. Like, Lacazette allows Xhaka to kind of not be that great in the attack. Like, you know what I mean? So once you upgrade those two positions, I think it kind of solves itself. Lionide, on tomorrow, we're going to be talking false nines, left wing, right wing, that second attacker coming in. That's what we're going to be talking about today. It's just the center forward, the main striker. So come back tomorrow and we'll be talking about Nkunku is somebody we'll be talking about. And Yo-Yo asks, are all the names mentioned good at pressing? Arteta clearly values defending foremost. So that leads me on to our next person, who I watched 2 games of him playing. Both of them were in the Champions League, obviously, because it's hard for me to find the Portuguese league. But the boy was running his ass off. And he was getting involved in the defense. He was tracking runners. He was heading the ball out on defense. And so I do think that this person could be a part of that hardworking ethos that we have right now at Arsenal, and that's Darwin Nunez. This name has come to the forefront of the short list over the last couple of days, and reports are saying that we were interested in him in January, but we couldn't get it done, or we just said we'll do it in the summer. And this is also somebody that I mentioned during the January transfer window, earlier in the January transfer window, as somebody that I really liked. Obviously got some pushback because, of the league that he plays in and stuff like that, and people weren't really sure about him. But if I have to choose anybody, this is the guy that I'm choosing. I think that this is the right direction to go in, despite maybe some of his inexperience. So here's the overview. Playing for Benfica, he's 22 years old. Darwin Nunez. He's 22 years old, 6'2". He's Uruguayan. He's from Artigas, and he's right-footed. Statistically, he comes in with 25 goals, 2 assists in 30 matches, and he has 6 yellow cards and 0 reds. Ryan Taylor Sport, again, from Express Sport. This was a response to one of his quote tweets that said, beginning to sense that Darwin Nunez has worked his way towards the top of this short list for Arsenal. And from EMAD AFC, this is something that he's like a news aggregator, basically saying that according to Record Portugal information, Arsenal have started its steps to try to sign Benfica striker Darwin Nunez, 22 years old. It is said that his club will ask for 80 million euros for him. So he, like all the rest of the strikers that we're looking at, will be expensive. So these are coming from Scott Willis from the Arsenal Vision podcast and Crab Stats, right? So these are just kind of like, because with him, because he doesn't play in the top 5 leagues, FBref doesn't have the bar charts for him. But luckily, like, we're able to get something. And this is coming from Scott. So these are basically like on the left-hand side, this is his shots. And most of his shots obviously come from inside the box. And if you watch his compilations, you can see that he basically is somebody that gets on the end of crosses. He gets on the end of cutbacks. He also creates a lot as well. He's somebody that floats out onto the left-hand side and off on the right as well, and whips in crosses, because I think that's also because of the formation that Benfica play with 2 strikers. So he's made to do a little bit more creating, but that's a good thing. We need somebody that can maybe do a little bit more. And so all of his goals, which are the yellow dots right here, are coming from like literally right inside that 6-yard box, which is good for us because those are where those crosses come in from Martinelli and Saka, and there's literally no one there. The yellow are the 21 shot on target. They're all kind of in those similar areas. And then he has some other like little shots from outside of the box, but we can see that primarily Darwin Nunez exists and lives in that penalty area. So this is his shot assist map. I guess these are like where the assists come from his no, these are his assists. So these are where his contributions come from, I think. Wait, hold on.
Yeah, the yellow will be his.
Yeah, the yellows will be his, right? So these are his 2 assists that where they came from, and then the rest are like where his contributions came from, right? But these didn't.
So the red, like, or the orangey circles, whatever, however you're seeing it,
those ones didn't get put away.
That's his key passes, yeah. So they're just like key passes in the game, and then the yellows are where he's actually got an assist from.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, his expected assists is 4. So he does get more assists than like Osimhen, right? So he can do some creating. That's not really our main focus, but it's something that I think for Arteta system, you kind of want to have a little bit of that, and he does have that, so he can like pick a cross and all of that kind of stuff. And if you have an opportunity to watch back the 2 games that he played against Ajax, he did a lot of that. And yeah, Benfica had a difficult time in those games, like getting into it, but in both games in the second half, you saw that he became more active. He never really gave up on either one of the ties. And as he got more and more involved in the game, you started to see that he could kind of push his way into the forefront of a match. And this is basically his chart, which looks pretty damn good. I'm not going to lie. I want to see where, I don't know if this is just from his, this is from the league. So this is from actually in the Portuguese league. So that's why it looks so good. Obviously, that league is not like amazing, but you can see like open play shots. It's quite high. His non-penalty XG is also good. XG per shot. So like, I mean, he's a high volume player in that league. He gets a lot done. What I also saw is that he has a lot of dribbles completed, and that kind of speaks to him drifting off into the left-hand side, and he can beat a man. There is like a funny clip of him where he's doing some step overs, and I'm like, yo, don't do any more step overs. Like, they're like them high step overs that like strikers do. but he can dribble, he can play in behind, he can link play a little bit. Open play expected assist is high for a forward. So he's pretty well rounded, but he also has the aerial presence and all of that kind of stuff that you're really looking for. So here are my pros and cons of Darwin Nunez. So the pros are he fits the profile of the project, which is important. He can run in behind and hold up, which also Osimhen has as well. He's a true goal scorer. So he's somebody that he's not like a false nine or anything. Like his first thought is to shoot and to get on the end of balls and stuff like that. And he's very physical. He's 6'2". He's probably going to bulk out a little bit more as well. He's likened a lot to Edison Cavani, and we know what he's about. And he works really hard. That was really important for me to see. Like there's several instances in that tie against Ajax where he's back in the penalty box defending, but he's also getting into the box to shoot and to be a presence in the box for on the attacking end. And so that kind of, I don't like to be this reductive, but I do think that South American players tend to really work hard. They have a work rate unlike anything I've ever seen before, and he's no different. His cons are the lack of experience in a big league. I think that's something that scares me just a little bit, paying 80 million for somebody who is going to be going from a league that's not really that great and coming into the Premier League. The only player that I've seen come straight from that league, there's two players, I guess, that come straight from that league to the Premier League and do really well is what Cristiano Ronaldo, coming from Sporting to Manchester United, and then Bruno Fernandes, same thing, coming from Sporting and coming to the Premier League, and they both hit the ground running. So maybe he could be like that. But he does lack experience in a big league. He likes to run in the left half space. That's something, it may not end up being a con, but I would like somebody who kind of exists centrally a little bit more than floats off to the left and the right. But I think that that's also because they play with the two striker formation, which is also a con for me because I have not seen him play as a lone striker. And as good as he is, you do get some help from the other striker. So I wonder if that will, I don't know. I wonder if that will be something that'll come up later. So I want to get your guys' thoughts on Darwin Nunez. But first, Souls, what do you think of this guy?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't really watched a full game of his, so it's very difficult to see kind of what he does over 90 minutes. But just speaking to people that I know who have followed him and have been actually touting his name 2 seasons ago, just speaking to the kind of people I know that watch La Liga Youth as well, he was playing there for a little while, and just kind of just getting a better understanding of who he is. He's been touted to be sort of a profile of a Fernando Torres or a Cavani type, very hardworking, build up play, and just someone who can get a lot of goals. So he is a very clinical striker. But even if you look at some of his statistics outside of the Portuguese league, look at his Champions League reign, for example, 8 games played, 4 goals, which is a good return for a striker of Benfica, if we're being honest. And then in the Europa League as well, he's had 7 matches, 5 goals, 1 assist. Just in one of those, well, might be in one of those games he hasn't really done anything. So when you look at those returns in European competitions, it's a good return and it's a good standard to be playing at. So even if we're looking at the Portuguese league not being a great league, we can look at his numbers within the Champions League and the Europa League and say, do you know what? There might be something about him. And when you're looking at strikers to fit the mold, he's I've always said it, he's the next best thing to Vlahovic. Like without a big name or a big league to back him. Obviously, with Vlahovic, he played in the Serie A. We know what you're getting. So it's a little bit different. It's part of the top 6 league, so I guess it's one of those where you have a bit more trust in, like, okay, he may be able to transition better. But I feel we look at leagues too much. With Martinelli, he came from the Brazilian League 3 or whatever they call it, like tier 3 of the Brazilian league. And look at him. You'd think he came from another European league. You would never think he came from where he did. So I think sometimes we get bogged down about leagues and not being good enough. And what you have to look at is whether they can transition into the league, or have they got the qualities, or have they got certain attributes that can transition and actually help them in the league. If we're looking at Martinelli, he has those attributes. And I feel Nunez has that. a bit more than Fabio Silva does, and that's why a lot of people are going to look at Fabio Silva. But he was touted to be very good. But when you look at Fabio Silva, he's not the same mold of player. And when you're looking at even his returns over his career, 131 professional games played, 60 goals, 18 assists, and when you're looking at that, and what is that, 78 goal contributions in 131 games for a
Yeah.
striker? That's what, 20? What is he now? Let me just
22.
check. Yeah, he's 22, so he's only just at the beginning of his career, and he's nearly reaching 100 goal contributions, and he's just below a goal contribution a game. So when you're looking at that, the numbers are promising. The profile is very promising, and when you look at and that's the key for me. It's always about, okay, can your statistics firstly back up what you're saying, but secondary to that is, does the profile fit? Because that's the one thing we keep forgetting is you can have a prolific goal scorer, like you can bring Ronaldo into this team, but I just don't think you'd get that many goals, and I don't think we'd be as productive. But if you bring in a profile that is actually sort of going to fit the mold, and I feel we've always said it, we want a Lacazette Aubameyang hybrid. And for me, if you're not going to get Vlahovic, Nunez is that profile, but just an unknown factor. He's just, even though he's got the numbers to back him, it's just because it's done in a supposedly a weaker league, we just don't know whether that will transition. And obviously, it's a big risk when you're spending anywhere from 60 to 80 million, pounds for him. It could turn out to be another Pepe situation where he comes highly regarded but could flop. There's always that risk. But I feel when you mitigate and when you look into it, there's not a lot to say why we shouldn't take the risk or the gamble on him, because he's got everything. And even if you need a bit of developing, and I just feel he is that risk worth taking in profile sense, just purely on a profile, just purely on how he plays and the way we play. And I feel that's, for me, the reason why I'd be willing, out of sort of the options that we've got, even if you want to add DCL and Isak into the equation, I feel he's probably the best risk or the most safe risk. I know it sounds a bit weird because you don't associate safe and risk, but he is the safest, riskiest option. Because even with the other ones, there's a part of their profile that I just don't. It doesn't. I'm like, it will work, but we're losing something, and that's why I think with Tammy, you're getting good build-up play, but then you're not getting that striker attribute. Osimhen, you're getting the striker, but you don't know what the build-up's going to do. But whereas with Nunez, like, again, it's still unknown, but you've seen him build up and you've seen him be a striker, so he's got a little bit of both about him. And even if you look at another thing, if you look at his positions that he's played 112 games as a centre forward with 44 goals and 18 assists. When you look at him as sort of a secondary striker or playing in a two-striker system, he's played, obviously, most of his Benfica career, but as sort of a shadow striker. He's had 8 games in that position, scoring 6 goals. So even if you want to put him into that number 10, into that Lacazette mold, he's got six goals in 8 games. So he does know how to do that, sort of pass it off, lay it off, and then go in behind again. And then if you look at sort of his wing, the only position he's played 3 at right wing. He's not really done anything. He's played 8 at left wing and got 10 goals. So when you're looking at sort of how we're looking at signings, we're looking at multiple positions. We're looking at very versatile profiles. Look at Tomiyasu, Ben White. Obviously, Ramsdale's a goalkeeper, so he ain't going to really play anywhere else. But when you're looking at Ben White, he can play right back, he can play CDM, he can play centre back, he can play, in multiple sort of defensive positions. When you look at Tomiyasu, it's the same thing. He's a right back for us who can play centre back and play CDM. When you look at Lokonga, he's got a dual role. He can play the 6, he can play the 8. When you look at Odegaard, for example, he can play an 8, a 10, or play off to the right. So there's multiple positions, and that's why I do think why Nunez is probably the one where that's why he's being touted, is because he has proven he can play multiple positions. But of course, we're not going to do that. We're not going to keep swapping him around.
Yeah.
But he's going to have a primary position, but he can also cover if needed. And that sometimes is a good thing to have in a squad. And if you wanted to play 2 strikers, for example, both strikers are needed, where we have played a 4-4-2 in some parts of the season, you can also play that. That's the only reason why, out of them, he'd probably be number 1, other than João Felix.
Yeah, for sure. John Dinkelberg says the thing about Darwin is out of all of the transfer targets, Nunez will take the most time to reach high performance. That makes some sense. Dev M says if we sign a striker like Nunez, where do you expect us to finish in the league? And I think that's a difficult question to answer without seeing him play with us. You know, he could be somebody that hits the ground running and looks natural, you know, in the Premier League and we do quite well. Or he could be almost like Patson Daka, somebody that came from a similar type of league that's not really a top 5 league and has needed time to adapt. And so if he does need time to adapt, we may not get what we need right off rip. And so I do think that's a difficult one to answer, but what I will say is that whatever striker that we do get, they need to be good enough and they need to have enough goals in them for us to secure top 4. That's the requirement for me. So whether it's Nunez, Osimhen, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Isak, whoever, that striker needs to be able to solidify top 4 for us. I think at the bare minimum, that would be my requirement. Mikey says FK of the latte firm interviewed a Serie A expert who said Osimhen is better than Vlahovic. He's a phenomenon. Nunez would be very orthodox. I think maybe you mean unorthodox. I don't know, but more maybe reliable in his method. Who knows? So I guess that begs the question: is if you're going to spend, let's say we have to spend the 80 million on Nunez. That's the quoted price, right? Let's say there's a bidding more. Is 20 million more and maybe 20 million more on Osimhen and maybe 20 million less on a midfielder or on not being able to get a right back or something? Is that worth it to make sure that we have the right striker? Is Osimhen $20 million more better than Nunez and also worth maybe not getting another position?
That is tough because, I mean, obviously Cedric has shown that he can be a reliable backup, and I guess it kind of depends on what Arsenal are looking to do with that, because that right back position is a very difficult one because we've been touted with attacking right back options, and we know that Tomiyasu isn't, the future right back position. He's going to maybe transition into more of a centre back for us or become one of the 4 centre backs in terms of just options to pick. But when you look at it, our 2 priorities firstly are to get that striker and to get that midfielder. And after that, I mean, we've got enough. I think there is enough even in the academy to come in and fill in those zones. And we just need to kind of secure a few players if that's the case. We can't let Xhaka go and we can't let Cedric go. And we're going to have to tie them down, or we're going to have to do something where we keep them for a season minimum if that's the way we want to go. Because, I mean, look, there's a new stipulation within Premier League. Well, I think it's only Premier League clubs. So, within FIFA, where you can only spend 70% of your your overall sort of income. So that obviously mitigates like owner investments and how much owners can put into the club because FFP is being scrapped. So that's going to beg the question of, with the pandemic, how much do we truly have to spend? So we've got to be careful, especially with Arsenal. We know we're going to get the wrong end of the stick if we do break these. We know we can't get away with it. We're not going to get those, easy, lenient punishments that, yeah, you've got a transfer ban that then gets overturned within the season anyway, which you don't even, see. If we appeal it, they're going to be like, right, we'll add another year on. So we've got to be careful. We can't be treading on their toes, especially with Arteta coming out at PGMOL and stuff like that. We're not in a favourable position to be breaking the rules at the minute. But when it comes to it, 20 million. I mean, I just want us to get the perfect player because that's the point we're at. We can't do the Lokongas and even though they're brilliant, they're absolutely brilliant, but we need to get the right player because 80 million or 100 million in my eyes is the same thing because if let's say for example you didn't spend 20 million and you got the wrong player, that's money gone in the drain. So you'd rather spend 20 million pounds, get a 100 million pound player who's going to guarantee you what you want, because Worst comes to worst, let's say he does do everything you want. You can sell him for £100 million, 110, £120 million with the way the market's going. Worst comes to worst, if let's say he's just securing us top four, getting us 15 goals a season, you'll still get 80 million, 70 million. So you're not losing a
Yeah.
huge amount. Whereas if you then cheapened out and got 80 million, and let's say he did crap the bed, you
Hmm.
probably, especially in Nunez, he's probably going to plummet in terms of price. Like it's going to plummet because he doesn't come with he comes with a high reputation, and when those players come in, his game is buried. Like it's like
Yeah.
Lukaku now. They're going to lose 50% of the market value of Lukaku because of how he's come and done at Chelsea. So it's difficult. For us, it's about getting what I think is perfect. And if I'm looking at, forget the names and forget the players and where they've played, if I'm just looking at the two players and you've told me this is the profile for one and this is profile for two, Nunez fits the mold more than an Osimhen in terms of just his overall game.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I look at it. Who is the less riskier option?
Hmm.
But everyone's got their opinions, I guess, on who they want as that striker. But for me, I'm more of a Nunez fan in profile than
Yeah.
I am an Osimhen fan in profile.
Yeah, that makes sense. Dave FC says with a player like Nunez, you probably don't need another out and out striker. An all around attacking player would probably make more sense. And just in the vein of that comment, I do have to say that that's kind of where I land. Like, I don't think we need to buy another striker. I think I'd prefer somebody that can play on the left and also like a false nine type that can play almost across the entire front three and then play Martinelli as the backup striker. That would be what I would do instead of buy Nunez and then turn around and buy Ivan Toney or something like that. That's just not what I think our the best use of funds is, especially when people want to really just gouge you for any type of striker that you're looking at. And so what that would look like is maybe like 60 million on Nunez and 30 million on Cody Gakpo from PSV. That's what I would look at, if we couldn't get a João Felix or Nkunku because they're too expensive. But that's kind of where I'm going with it. And that's why tomorrow when we do the left wing / attacker false nine, there'll be a mixture of players in there, but that's kind of the direction that I would potentially go in. P Trim says, guys, do you consider the available strikers in the current market as good as in past seasons? I don't even know, because like what are the last strikers that kind of came through-ish? I don't know. It feels like we've come in an in-between period where we're not quite good enough to fight for like Holland and Mbappe, and everything underneath that is expensive but risky, if that makes sense. So I would say just based on that, the market is not amazing. But what do you think?
Actually, it's a very good question. I mean, I feel football's changed a lot from a few seasons ago in terms of kind of strikers that you're looking at. It there was, I mean, a couple of seasons ago, you're looking at very techie players like your Agueros, your Gabriel Jesus, your Messi's in centre forward, those players who can take the ball, dribble, do a bit of everything. Now, the game's kind of transitioning into sort of, did people just want a fox in the box, a poacher type? Your Drogba would have been perfect for this sort of football. Your Haaland, and then you've got the other side who, well, I mean, Mbappe is just a freak of nature, really, because he's in his own bracket in terms of profile, in terms of striker. Then you've got really the Haaland and whatever else you can get, because Haaland, Vlahovic, Nunez, Tammy Abrahams, I mean, different levels of players in terms of quality, but all with the similar profile. So it is very difficult. It's a weird one because strikers, I feel, have a very short window to really make an impact. Because look at Calvert-Lewin. If we were talking last season, half or more of this fan base would probably be like, yeah, 100%, let's go for him. But then he got the injury, and look at Everton, and that influences your decision on whether you want to bring a striker in. So it's so weird because Osimhen could flop it next season and that's his name gone. Nunez could have the same effect. Like, he could flop next season and his name's gone. And then there'll be a few other players coming into the mold. So I don't know. it's difficult. I wouldn't say it's better. I just think it's different.
Yeah. Yo-Yo asked, do you think the striker options will depend on qualifying for Champions League? Personally, I think the striker is going to be an expensive marquee signing, regardless to if we're in Europa or not. I think that the positions that will be affected, whether or not will be affected by where we finish in the league, will be the second striker, second attacker that comes in, and whether or not we can get a right back. I think those are the two positions that, like, if we don't make Champions League, Cedric stays instead of us going out and buying a right back. If we don't make Champions League, that instead of bringing in Nunez plus Cody Gakpo or Nunez plus João Felix or whatever, you get Nunez plus Lacazette, on a 2-year deal or some shit like that. So I think that's more, I think Arsenal, regardless, because you think about it, we were willing to go in. And if you're thinking about from the other end, we can talk about that as well. But Arsenal were willing to bring in Vlahovic for a lot of money. And that's a Champions League level signing before we even qualified, right? Now, in terms of will players want to come to Arsenal if we finish 5th or 6th, I do think we're even without Champions League, we're still more attractive than we were over the last 2 years because we have a direction. Well, obviously, if we do miss out, it'll be by a couple of points. And so I don't think it'll be like we can't get anybody. You may not be able to get an Osimhen. I think you need Champions League to get him, but I still think you could get a Nunez. I still think he would come regardless if you have Champions League or not, because obviously we can pay him more, and it's London and all that kind of stuff, and the project. So from the other end, I think we'll be attractive enough to still be able to go after the targets that we really want. But if we don't have Champions League, I can see us not going after the second striker not being somebody, or the second attacker not being something to get you out of your seat. It may end up being Lacazette and no right back or something like that. Do you agree, or you think different?
No, I agree. I think even without Champions League football, we've attracted big names. We've got Gabriel coming to Arsenal instead of going to United. We've gotten, Thomas Partey coming in, despite, Atletico trying to sign him to a new deal. So you've got to look at it in that perspective as well, where we've still gotten big names in. It's not like we're not attracting these names. Obviously, Champions League football just gives you another, sort of token or another incentive to want to come to Arsenal. Like you've alluded to, we're in London, with the capital, in the capital of England. Look at the players we've got, look at the project. It is an exciting time. And if we can top that off by finishing in Europe, it's no longer Arteta's words. It's look at what we're doing. It's more of, this is what I said I'll do. Look what I am doing. And I've said I'm going to win the league in 3 to 4 seasons. This is how you're going to do it. And this is how you're going to accelerate it. And it no longer becomes just words. It's actually, I don't even, like Arteta can walk into a room and go, well, here's my project, without even saying what his project is. And players will buy into it. Whereas with Thomas Partey, you had to ring him and tell him about his project and show him. But now, if we get, like I said, top 4 will just show that it's no longer just words, and there's tangible evidence to what this project actually is and where the process is going and the process and the progress we've made. So yeah, no, that's the only reason I think obviously it's gonna make a difference.
Yeah, for sure. Dave, I didn't include Adeyemi because I'm pretty sure he'll end up at Dortmund, and he doesn't fit the profile that we're talking about, which is the complete 9 that has already been spoken about. Like, I think you kind of have to stick with that just for this conversation. Pap says, do you guys think we make top 4? If we make top 4, Eddie renews? I hope not. I want him to make his exit. I think Souls is pretty much on the same page with that.
That was pretty funny though.
Priceless Truth says Broya is good. I do think Broya is good, but they already slapped a 60-something million dollar price tag or £1 million price tag on him. And Chelsea are going to be in a position now where, depending on their owners, they're not going to be able to go out and spend 100 million on a Lukaku and just continuously loan out their young players. So I think Broya and Tammy are going to be held in a holding pattern for a while until Chelsea decides if they want to keep them, and their price tags will keep people away from them long enough for them to make that decision. And there's no way that we should be spending 68 million pounds on Armando Broya. He looks talented, but and if there's even a smidgen of a chance that he could potentially play for Chelsea next season, he won't be coming to us. And just like Tammy, Chelsea made it known that they didn't really want to sell Tammy to us, and they would make it more difficult. So it wouldn't be any different for Armando Broya. So that's why I didn't add him on the list. I think it's mostly on this one. Obviously, there's other options. Isak, DCL. I can do a part 2 if you guys want. If you guys want to talk about those guys too, we can. But I picked out 2 that I think we really should be looking at, in Osimhen and Nunez. And then with Tammy, it was just more like a what could he have brought? And you guys pretty much said exactly what I thought you would, is that he would lift the floor, but ultimately his ceiling is not high enough. So yeah, let's see. Yo-Yo is saying Saka, ESR, Gabriel, Martinelli, international call-ups are a great advert for Arteta's work. It is, especially with the young players and stuff that we're still kind of looking at, which I think is not going to change. Like, I don't think we're going to go out there, even though there was a comment that Arteta made that kind of made it felt like we would look at maybe a more experienced attacker. I'll pull those up for maybe tomorrow's show because I think it's more pertinent to that. But he did make a comment that made it seem like we were looking at somebody more experienced to come into that front line. And that worries me, because in that 20 to 24-year-old range, we are spot on. But the 26s and above, it's been hit or miss, so I think we need to be careful with that. And I hear you guys on Osimhen costing 100 million or whatever. You guys also have to remember that, like, we're not going to pay it all up front. Everything we're going to do is going to be paid in installments. I think Arsenal will be willing to do that for the right player. But it feels like Nunez is kind of the guy that people are looking at. Dave says, would you consider players like Richarlison, Dennis, Jesus, who can play anywhere across the front line, would be cheaper options than João Felix? João Felix is my number one option in that left wing / false 9 position. I just feel like he would just be a dream. But I would not consider Richarlison. I cannot see him in Arsenal kit. Dennis, if, like, let's say we go after Nunez and it's expensive, and for, like, let's say Europa League is a reason why we wouldn't be able to spend top dollar, then I would take Dennis as an additional striking option. I would prefer him over Ivan Toney. When people keep saying Ivan Toney, I'm like, why would you bring in somebody who has that nasty attitude? Like, you see what he's doing to Brentford, he'll turn around and do it to us. So he's not really hitting, like, and then at the same time, he's, to me, just not that good. But Dennis, to me, is an interesting option, like a cut price option. And you guys know how I feel about Gabriel Jesus. I love him to death. As a second option, I would love it. But I feel like that is unrealistic. What do you think about those 3 options?
Yeah, I've spoken about Emmanuel Dennis before when we were speaking about what players would take from relegation teams. I like him. I really am a fan of Dennis. I think he offers a lot in terms of what you look at Watford, for example, and how their quality isn't great. It's not overwhelming, and they're always struggling systems and like manager changes. Like, I don't even know. It's like every week they've got a new manager. So to be able to perform under those circumstances just goes to show how professional he can be, because a lot of players have said it. Pogba came out recently and said, with the amount of, systems I've had to play in, positions I've had to play in under different managers, etc., hasn't really helped my career. Whereas I'm not saying Dennis has complained, or he probably won't complain, but he still has performed under 3 different managers. So that's what I like about him. He's adaptable. And yeah, if you're looking at, sort of a cutthroat option, just to depth it a bit with a bit of Premier League experience, a team that is looking to be relegated at the moment, if we're looking at, some possible relegation teams. So if they do get relegated, he could be coming at a cut price, The other one is Ismail Assar for me. They're the two. Like if you look at, I don't even for me, Jesus would probably just be as expensive as anyone else. So you're looking at a price difference of maybe 20 to 30 million. To because he's going to cost you 60 to maybe 70 million euros to bring in. So it's not really cheap. So no, and then Richarlison, it all depends on what Everton end up doing. If they do go down, then yes, he could be a cut, like a cut option, but not for the way we play. I just don't.
Can
He,
you see him? And I just can't even see him at Arsenal. Like,
he's not his. It's more of his the way he plays and his attitude. It's just not Arsenal, and
yeah, he
I
doesn't
feel people.
smile
Yeah,
enough. Our
yeah,
boys
no,
smile, like, you know.
yeah. So yeah, no, for me, out of the options, it'd be Dennis or Saar. I know that wasn't mentioned, but they'd be the two players that if you had to go for a cheap option, I guess, like or a lower end option, they'd be the only two that I'd take.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Liam, I will explain this tomorrow on the show when we talk left wing, false nine, wingers, extra attacker, second striker, whatever. We'll talk about this. I think for me, this is about squad building. And when I look at the squad, I think Martinelli does become the backup striker. That's what I would do. I would buy a striker and then put Martinelli behind him, take him off of left wing, and then you have Emil Smith Rowe plus somebody else sharing that left wing. But also Emil Smith Rowe, as he gets older, I just think he's going to end up being some sort of interior player playing like false nine or midfield. And so you'll see some of that in the next couple of seasons. And so you kind of move pieces around. I don't think when I look at Martinelli and ESR, I don't see left forwards. I see players that are doing good jobs in that position, but ultimately end up being something else for us in the future. And so I would like to see us bring in somebody who does play left wing, that is their position, and then we can move the other boys into the positions that they'd be best in and allow them to grow into those as time goes on. That's kind of what we will talk about tomorrow. You guys can debate me and tell me that I'm stupid and all that kind of stuff. I love that. Nashville says ESR develops an 8. So let's go ahead and get out of here. It's been almost 2 hours. So I think we've done this. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Again, tomorrow around the same time, we'll be doing the next show. And then on Monday, we'll do midfield. So you guys asking about Matthias Nunez and Paqueta and those guys, Awar, whatever, Bellingham. We'll talk about those options as well. And if in the comment section you want me to go over the strikers again with Isak and other guys in there, let me know and I will do one before the international break ends. Make sure, and Yo-Yo, I did get your request for a midterm review. We'll be doing that next week as well. So keep a lookout for that. Make sure that you go on Twitter and follow Souls at Gunnar Souls and me at Jacinio Tweets and at SheKnowsArsenal. And I will see you guys. Oh, also, just really quick, because I did see this come in. Sorry. Thank you so much for your super chat. Tony Tone says Napoli paid 80 million for Victor Osimhen. They are going to ask for 100 million plus. Yes, they will. But I think Arsenal will pay for the right person. I do. I think we're going to spend the money. All right, you guys, like that video, subscribe to the channel. Bye, guys.